Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Bill Acevedo with Dell OMNM Tech Talk. Today we are presenting functional permissions. This session will be recorded and distributed. It is about 10 minutes in length and will be followed up with questions and answers if there are any. So let's get started. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to type them in the chat window and we'll review them at the end if we have time. So what are functional permissions? Generally in OMNM, the permissions, these are the permissions that are going to control the right-click menu options. There are things like add, new, copy, delete, and all of these will map directly to a permission inside of the permission manager. These are things like the read, write, execute, update, delete permissions that we'll have for each feature. In this demo, we'll walk through an example of how to set these permissions. So in OMNM, all function permissions are applied to roles, and then the roles are assigned to users. And so what I want to show you here is typically when you have a user created that's new, once you save them, you're going to have this option for roles. And so you're going to have an option to go in here and assign specific roles. Now what you see here is a role I've created, but normally what you're only going to see the administrator and the power user, but there's a third role on here as well. It's just called user, and everyone will get the user role. And the user role has some minimum functionality that allows them to have access to the portal. That role can be modified as well, as we'll see, but primarily you'll have those three: user, administrator, and power user. And roles are cumulative. So if you have a role in, say, for example, user, and someone gives you another role on top of that, you will inherit whatever is in the user role as well as whatever roles that you also provide. So just keep that in mind. But everyone will have that user role as a base. And again, to add roles, what you're going to do is simply go down here to the role manager in the roles section and just click add, and it's going to add that role for you. Now, by default, when you add a role, it's not going to have any permissions. So we're going to need to go into the permission manager. This is where we're going to spend a lot of our time today, is in the permission manager. It's where you're going to need to assign permissions to your roles. So first of all, I want to show you what a basic user gets. And so as I pointed out here, let me just step back a second here and go back to this user. This particular user has what's called a test role, and this test role was based on the user role. So this person actually is getting the default user role and the test role. Both of them are just based on basic user access. And so let me just show you here, this user's logged in. This is Bob here. And as you can see, I'll right click and you'll see that they've only got execute permissions. And this is going to be true throughout the portal. They'll only have the execute permissions that are applied to the user or this test role. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build on this and show how we add those. So let's go into the permission manager and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here's the user permission, user role. And then you would update permissions by clicking on the actions. And then we also got the power user and the administrator. And so let's just take a quick look at the default user role. You'll see here everything is just strictly execute across the board. And that gives you that visibility, and even for the report one that we just saw, you're going to see they just have execute, which is all you're going to see there. On the power user and administrator, you're going to get incrementally more functionality. You see here we have a lot of delete, write, read, and add, and that goes through the application features with varying levels of privilege access. There's not a whole lot of difference between power user and administrator. One of the key differences is that you can come in and modify these permissions if you're an administrator. So I mentioned adding a new role. So if you were to come into this screen here and you have just created a role, for example, role 2 we'll assume that is a blank role, nothing in it. And so what we would do is we'd go to edit and say, what permissions do we want to add? Well, there's a lot of permissions in here. You don't want to have to add each one by one, although you could. So you have the option here of copying an existing role, administrative, power user, or user, and then just say copy, and that's going to create a whole new role based on that exact same template of whatever you selected. So then you can go in and modify that role, remove or add permissions as needed. It's a nice thing to know. When you're in a role that's already defined, the way you're going to modify these permissions, as I mentioned, you're going to click on this little actions button over here, and you're going to add the read, write, execute, whatever is necessary. In some cases, you're going to want to bulk set, read or write or execute or delete across a bunch of permissions. The way to do that is with the Advanced tab. And so here you have the option to select, what particular feature you want to set, and you can set them all at once by select all or unselect all, and you can set them across the board. If you just want everybody just to have read or just write or whatever the case may be, you have that flexibility here. So you can go through write, set your permissions, execute, add, and delete. So it allows you to bulk set across many different function permissions. Allows you to set the attribute. Okay, that's a good thing to know there. Down at the bottom here, you're going to see a show assigned and show all. Not all permissions are assigned. Sometimes you'll have some that say none. And so if I can see like an example here, inventory, containers, change, container ownership. The default here is none. Nobody even has any permissions to that within this role. And so you won't see those if you say assign, because these are just the ones assigned to this role. So keep in mind, if you're not seeing what you're looking for, it might possibly be a permission that has no permission set on it. And you might also see this if we upgrade the product and add a new feature. We don't have the ability to necessarily set that by default sometimes, and so you'll need to go in and update this permission, and it'll be a none, and you'll need to update that to whatever permissions are appropriate for that role. You have a search capability here. For example, we're going to be looking at the report manager today, just as our example, and so you can quickly find your report and see what, or your feature, and see how it's set for the function permissions. Okay, so the functional permissions, in terms of what they mean, I think I already mentioned that. Read, generally you're going to get things like a detail screen, and this may not map directly to an explicit item on every single report because it doesn't always apply. But generally you're going to get the ability to read or see things about that particular object. Write is going to allow you to edit, import, or export. Execute is going to obviously allow you to execute. Add is going to probably expose the copy or new functionality to allow you to create a new instance. And then delete will expose any delete buttons that are available. So let's just go and see how that's going to work here. So as I showed you already, our user had execute permissions. They only had options, 2 options here. We'll just look at that again. They've got execute report, advanced, and execute report and share with user. These are the basic usage here. So we're going to go in here and we're going to give them read permissions. We're just going to apply that, save it. Okay, so there's a rule that runs in the background. I don't recall if it's 1 minute or every 2 minutes that updates permissions. We don't want to wait for that for this demo, so I'm going to sign out and sign back in. That will automatically make the permissions get reread. Okay, go over to reports again. And so we're going to click in here and right click. Okay, so now what you see is that you now have the details and schedule options. So the read capability added that. So you can go see the details of a report and allows you to see the schedules or implement a schedule. All right, let's try another one. And go back to report manager. Again, this is on my test role that I created. This time we're going to add write. See what that adds, right? Apply and save. I'm going to go sign out, sign back in. Go to reports. Okay, and right click, and now we see that we now have the ability to edit as well as import and export selections. Again, that's part of the write feature. And do another one here. Manager. Let's do the add. Apply. This should give us our copy and new functionality. There we see copy and new. Okay, let's just do one last one here. Let's add the delete capability. Click and delete, apply, save. Reports. And now we see the delete options that are available for this particular item, delete history. So that's how you build your access or restrict your access. I showed adding, but you would take them off in the same way, and you could build your role. And so one thing to remember here in the permission manager is that if you do add a new role and you start taking away permissions from somebody, let's say you copy the user and start taking them away from your user role. Let's say you went to reports and removed execute from reports or something, or any of these things here. Remember that the user role is still there, and so since everyone inherits from user, they're still going to get the execute from here. So if you don't see your permissions taking effect, then just keep in mind that you may have another role assigned to this user that is overriding this. So you need to check both. Okay, that pretty much wraps it up here. There's one last thing that I want to clarify here. Refresh that. Let me go back here. Expand these here, and then just want to show you how to add a role and clarify a few things here. There's permissions, different kinds of permissions within OMNM, and when you get into this role screen, to add a role, you simply just click add and add it, and you want to add a regular site role, a regular role, sorry. And these other roles, we don't use organizational roles in the product. Site roles are more restricted to when you start using multi-tenancy and you have a role specific to a multi-tenant site. A little bit of an advanced topic. For the basic OMNM, top level roles and permissions, you just want to use a regular role. And so the next question might be, why do I see so many roles here, and even regular roles? And so again, the only ones you're going to be concerned with are the administrator, the power user, and the user, and then whatever roles you create in terms of regular roles. There's other roles in here, and this starts to bridge the gap between the LifeRay or the portal, the underlying portal implementation roles and OMNM functional prism permissions. The permission manager and the roles that I've been discussing were strictly related to OMNM features and functionality in terms of how the NMS functions. What you see here is a lot of roles and permissions, and when you go over here and click permissions, this is a different type of permission. These permissions are more involved with the actual portal, access to the portal components, and so it's not the functional permissions for allowing or disallowing OMNM features, and so that's a different topic we can get into at a later time. Just keep that in mind that when you want to do roles and permissions, this is not the place to go. You need to go into Permission Manager and the Role Manager and manipulate them from there. Okay, I want to thank everyone for joining us. If you have any additional topics you'd like to hear, please feel free to shoot us an email and let us know.